So the MTS and the IMTS systems each had 32 channels, and we're talking about frequency channels here, and those were between 40 megahertz and 460 megahertz. And so a few points that we discussed before was that each channel needs some width of frequencies, which defines its channel width. So if we look at, for instance, a channel maybe over here, there would be 32 such channels between 40 and 460, and they each, like as we said, they have some amount of space between them that they need. And we call this in here the channel width. This is the width, or however large it needs to be in order to transmit in that window. So each of them has a finite width that they need. They can't just be at a single frequency. They need some range of frequencies in order to operate most efficiently and most effectively. So there were only 32 of these total on the MTS and the IMTS systems, which means that at any given time, you only have 32 channels to play with, so you can only have 32 calls at any given time. So you can imagine that as people started hearing about the idea of mobile phone technology, and even if they were just car phones, so there were probably many more than 32 people who wanted to use the network. And eventually that caused the network to start bursting at the seams. So operators needed to deal with this issue to try to get more people to be able to talk on these phone systems. And so the first option was to go to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And the FCC was established in 1934 to oversee the development of communication technologies in the US. And one of the things that it does is it deals with licensing issues. So you need a license to transmit in a cellular band. So your operator, whoever your phone operator is, AT&T, Verizon, and so on, they need a license to be able to use that band of frequencies. And that license will come from the FCC when they apply for it. So now, the process of applying to the FCC for a license, though, is pretty grueling, and it could take many, many years before any deliberation is made. And they're also very, very expensive to create this. So it could be many, many millions of dollars back then even in order to get more spectrum, because there's only a finite amount of frequency in which we can transmit in, because our phones can only handle a finite amount of frequencies. So clearly that resource, as we have more and more people, becomes more and more scarce. So there's some bands, like for instance the Wi-Fi bands, if we're talking about Wi-Fi technology, that is unlicensed spectrum. But cellular is licensed, so you need to buy a license, which could cost a lot of money to be able to transmit in a cellular band. So maybe the operators would have petitioned the FCC at this point, but in the meantime, they needed to come up with another option. And the only other option was to try to figure out how they could fit more people in this same band, instead of expanding and having more frequency to try to fit more people. So rather than having 32, try to have more, like 64 or 128 or so on, keep going up. So let's try to think through this logically for a second. How would you get more people to be able to use the network at the same time? So suppose you're transmitting. This is you sitting on your cell phone transmitting. Now, if someone like Charlie is this far away from you, Charlie may also be transmitting. And the assumption that we're making here is that we're saying that each of them has to be on a separate frequency channel. So you might be on this channel, and Charlie might be on this channel. But why do you have to be on separate channels? Well, as we said, it's because they would cause some sort of an interference with each other. But how pronounced is this really going to be? Is this problem really going to be? It kind of depends upon distance, if you think about it. If you're speaking wherever you are, I clearly can't hear you from all the way over where I am because we're very far away from one another. And the reason that I can't hear you is due to the fact that your signal attenuates as it goes out at a farther distance from you. It attenuates as it gets further away. So in some distance around you, say this circle right here, your phone signal will be very strong and pronounced. But then as we go further and further away, like for instance Ben over here, he won't hear your signal as strong because it will fade, or it will attenuate as it gets over to Ben. And then maybe by the time it gets to Charlie, it's so soft that Charlie can't even hear, or Charlie's phone can't wouldn't be able to hear your signal, and it wouldn't really cause any interference in that end. We call this concept attenuation. So attenuation is really the decaying or the fading away of a signal as it goes further away from its source. We not only have attenuation over the air, we also have attenuation over wires as well. So while attenuation sometimes looks upon as a bad quality because you may want to be able to get your signal to a farther enough place without dealing with the fact that it's going to get smaller and smaller, attenuation is actually necessary, because if there wasn't a thing called attenuation, we'd all be able to hear each other's sounds and conversations at the same time, and that would drive everyone crazy.